the TeachPitch Podcast. We are very excited to be launching a series of interviews for TeachPitch, a global community of 50,000 subscribers from over 205 countries to date. And for these interviews, we have selected a number of subscribers who have achieved great things. And by great, I mean amazing. Think of former presidents, entrepreneurs, people who've built hospitals, huge non-profit organizations, successful journalists, doctors, etc. And what all our guests have in common is that despite their great success, they've encountered many enormous challenges. So what were these challenges and how did they overcome them? That's what we're going to be talking about here. My name is Aldo and I'm massively looking forward and very grateful you can join us on this journey. So sit back, relax, and download the podcast here. Wow, what a ride. We did 24 episodes every single week. So over a period of 5 months, we managed to deliver what I think were very nice interviews. And now we've landed on the last episode of season 1, episode 25. This episode's basically meant for us to look back. And when I say us, I mean the entire TeachPitch Podcast team, which is myself. And then we have Inva, who is helping us out as a project manager. But the spider in the web, the person who keeps it all together, the person who makes sure that these interviews come alive and that they are published, is our lovely producer, Natalie Piles. And Natalie and I wanted to do an episode together, just to look back, to do a retrospective, as they say, just to talk through all the things that have happened. So, hi, Natalie, how are you?
Great, Aldo. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be on this side of the microphone for the episode with you today.
Yeah, now people can hear your voice. I mean, you have already heard Natalie's voice because she is our advertising voice. Right, you are the impeccable voice of our ads, and you also,
Thank you.
Yeah, and not only ads, you also do kind of the credits at the end. That's all you. So, maybe Natalie, what did you think when I first approached you to help us make the TeachPitch podcast? What did you think? Is like, what, this crazy Dutch guy? What does he want?
I was pretty excited to work with someone who had such a global network. Like, your business has a really large reach and you know so many cool people from all over the world. So I felt a little starstruck to get to work with you.
Oh, wow. Well, I just know how to brag. I just know how to make noise. There's absolutely nothing to it. It's just, just me making noise and being lucky that I have these guests who say yes. That's all there's to it. But I'm happy I am impressed you in some shape or form so we could get this going.
Oh, you are not a bragger. I have a very sensitive bragging meter, and
okay.
No.
Okay. I know how to conceal it very well. Well, that's good. That's good. That's good to hear.
This podcast is brought to you by Mindstone, a platform that lets you build courses curated from the best online content, helping your students learn faster and remember more. Check out mindstone.com and find out how you can get started. We're so happy to be partnering with Hee Ha Ho, an interactive video platform that enables teachers and students to easily create amazing clickable videos for learning. Check out heehaho.com. That's HIHAHO.com for more information and your free starter account. A big thank you to our friends at Zeus Maths Challenger, the only puzzle that effectively boosts your numeracy, critical thinking, and brain power. Go to czeusspuzzles.com, that is spelled CZEUS puzzles.com, to get your brain buzzing. We are so excited to be working with the team Learning Ladders, the only platform that provides assessment that goes way beyond tracking to effectively support teaching and learning for EYFS, primary, and secondary settings. Go to learningladders.info to find out more.
No, I mean, I think it was just an awesome experience because how it all started was before, bumping into Natalie, we had to plan to do something with a podcast. And I had an original 4 guests that I had interviewed already in, I think, end of 2019 or maybe the beginning of 2020. And I had these interviews in a raw format shelved, but with all the uhs and ahs and no music and, 1.5 hour conversations with all the glitches. And I liked the recording, but I did not know what to do with them further than that. And I also knew that if I wanted to take this seriously, then I would need to start a planning of more than just these 4 episodes. And so, and that took a bit of time to say, okay, how are you going to program this? How are you going to start this? There's quite some logistics to it. I mean, it's not overly difficult, but you do need to commit to it, right? So, and then with those 4 episodes, I bumped into Natalie, who said, yeah, sure, I will have a look at those episodes. So we dusted off the recordings that we had, and you made them into magic. And, that was our luck because we were like, okay, yeah, that's what we want to do. Here's how we want to bring it together. And then that started rolling because those 4 episodes also ignited, ourselves as a team, but also other guests because they want to hear if we're serious, yes or no, right? And the listeners, of course. So
yes, those were a great way to set the tone for what you wanted to accomplish. And you're helping to jog my memory, actually, because I remember back at the beginning loving the idea of getting to work in education again, or at least feel like I was working in education again, because I am a former teacher too. So I remember those first episodes. Yes, that was wonderful that you had recorded those already, because when I come in to help with a podcast launch, if the podcast host already has content recorded, already has archives, that's exciting for me because there's already momentum and you already are, committed and passionate to the podcast.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but there was enough to kind of push it forward. That was good. And that's just, us being very insecure human beings. You just need loads of confirmation that what you're doing actually makes sense. Because at that point, I wasn't really sure. I was like, does anyone want to listen to this? Is this interesting? There are billions of podcasts. So, what's going to, get people interested into ours, right? So, but yeah, slowly but surely we geared up from there. And then, and where we are today, and, Natalie, you did a little bit of research. It's like we are nearly at 15,000 unique downloads. We have 331 5-star ratings. We're in it now for 5 months. And we're very global. Our biggest audience is in the United States, overwhelming number of listeners in the United States. So thank you to everyone from the USA listening, but equally a very big welcome and thank you to people in other parts of the globe. We weekly get kind of like the charts of where we're growing, and just last week I was pleased that we were in the top 100 in Venezuela, as we are in Cyprus, in the Netherlands, we were in Bahrain as well for a while, in Sweden. So that's just magic. It's really absolute magic that people from all over the world are listening in. So, that really makes it worth our while.
And that is really rewarding to us. And it also makes sense because your company, TeachPitch, is a global company in the first place. So will you really quickly tell us how you started your company, what your company does? I just want to be able to frame this from the perspective of everything you've done and brought to the table. That was a loaded question, right?
Yeah, that was a loaded question. Just tell us everything about you and kind of where you're from and all those things. This is something that I just often forget. So apologies to those listening in and those who haven't really grasped kind of how this all came together and who also justifiably so ask themselves, like, who the hell is this guy? So, that's a very good question, Natalie. Thank you so much for asking that. And it does merit some explanation. So I started TeachPitch in 2014, previously having worked in the educational and scientific publishing world for about 10 years. I remember starting my first job and, being very interested in how big organizations and big companies worked, but already from the get-go also being very entrepreneurial. So basically being way too stubborn, to work for a big company, because I just wanted to do my own thing. Mm-hmm. And, I always say it's a bit of a weak spot of mine, is like I really like social impact. So, and I'll get to it in a minute why I think it's a weak spot, but I really like kind of, things that help people on a social level. So before I started my professional career, I was already involved in building an educational charity. And what I managed to do, because I think it was the right sector, working for a big company, I managed to combine basically the growth of an educational charity with technology, and a technology specifically focused on the dissemination of educational content. I still hope that makes sense. And that gave life to TeachPitch, because I basically looked at, okay, I want to mobilize a community of people who care for education. And whilst working, again, for a big publishing company, I just started after hours building something, a platform where in the beginning it wasn't even teachers, anyone who was interested in education could register to, and that then grew into becoming teachers. And I think in 2014, when I started, this was a massive echo chamber. So just me shouting like, come on, sign up here, and I've got great things to offer, and sign up to my platform. And then that started to live a life of its own. So at a certain point, we were in the thousands of teachers. I'm like, well, I don't need to scream anymore, because every single day new people sign up, and they obviously see something's happening here. So while I was doing that in combination with my job, the number of teachers signing up got me so anxious, because I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm spending enough time on this, whether I should be spending more time on this, but if I do, then how am I going to make that sustainable? What am I going to live off? And then miraculously, everything just came together. So I got funding, and I got investors, and I got, proper media attention and people looking at it, and clients, and that started to grow. And, that's 7 years ago, and that gave life to TeachPitch. And so what I feel so blessed with on this journey is that, and this is again where I like social impact so much, is when you start talking about what it is that you want to do, when you reach out to people, you reach out to the world and explain it to them, then people really start thinking along. And I noticed that a lot of people who were thinking along weren't necessarily the people signing up to the platform, because of the simple fact that they weren't teachers. And, and so that was something that, like, okay, well, I still want to demonstrate that these people are involved in some shape or form with TeachPitch. And that basically gave life to the podcast, because a podcast is a great way of demonstrating that a lot more people care than just the target audience that you have in mind. And I think specifically for teachers, it is important to demonstrate that a lot of other people care as well. That was one of the goals of the podcast. And then the other one was, I think maybe a personal journey of mine, is that I think media nowadays is very snippety. Everything needs to be short. Everything needs to be quick. If you are, for instance, if you've been successful in your life, then you need to explain in under 10 seconds where that success came from. there's just so much information and people want to know quickly, so they can pigeonhole you very quickly and say, okay, this person does that or this person did that. And I just thought that was annoying. And I thought like, well, there's got to be a way to show people that the path to success isn't without its challenges, and also find a medium to demonstrate what these challenges are. That's also why in all 24 interviews, we speak about challenges and we speak about how people overcame certain things. And because they overcame these, they ended up where they ended up. So that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with teachers, but it was more my own personal motivation because I thought it was just so damn important.
And it speaks to the growth mindset, which is just shaking the world these days, thank heavens, where people are finally becoming more comfortable with failure. And I think if we can model that for students and children, then, wonderful. And if we can start talking more about mistakes and regrets and challenges, then I'm on board for sure with your mission. But it has always made me want to ask you if you would share one of your challenges that maybe you've overcome.
Oh, wow. That's going to be an entire season, Natalie, all my challenges. I think the biggest challenge, top of mind, because again, there are so many, but the biggest challenge for me was to be able to continue to put out all these little fires. Because I think if you start a company, and I so recognize that, for instance, in conversations with the fashion designer, episode 23, which is the fashion designer, which is RVDK, Roland van der Kemp, but also episode 13, which is Ruth Mustenbroek, who's a perfumer. These people, if you listen to the interviews, they've worked so damn hard. And you notice that because they're very good at one thing, they're very good as creatives, but then running a company isn't only about being creative, right? Running a company is about also knowing when to talk to the accountant to make sure your end of year accounts are submitted. I would always like to call them Apple activities. You've got Apple and Orange activities, and the Orange activities are the ones that give you energy, that make you dream, right? So that's more the creative end, that's the podcasting. But then equally so, you've got so many logistical things that you're like, well, I never imagined that this would be the dream of me filling out my tax application or those things. But that
the admin stuff,
yeah, and that's like 80% of it, right? If not 90% of it. So you see that these people, they're so hardworking, and they basically see like, okay, I need to, if I want to be successful, then I need to be able to do all of these things as well, because you don't have the money to outsource that or to delegate that in the beginning. You just need to do it all yourselves. And I think that was, for me, one of the challenges in the very beginnings. Like, listen, I need to do everything myself. So automatically the things that I'm not good at, they are exposed, right? It's a very hard confrontation with yourself. It's like there's no weakness that you can cover up. No stone is unturned in terms of who you are. So I consider it a challenge, but I also consider it a blessing. It's quite purifying, if you know what I mean, because you just need to go at it and you learn a lot about who you are.
I see that. Yes, you're all the links of the chain.
You're all the links of the chain, and you need to make sure you don't drop anything. And if you do, you need to make sure you're working with people who are graceful and courteous enough to point that out to you so you can correct your mistake.
Yeah.
And then let's look a little bit at our guests, because I wanted to really talk about, everyone we've spoken to over these 24 episodes, and just recap a little all the people that we've heard of and that we've spoken to.
Right.
And I think in the beginning, I was thinking of it like, okay, who are your favorites? And I was like, no, I can't reveal I have favorites. I cannot say that.
It's not the right question.
That's not the right question. Yeah.
But yeah, as we look back, I'm sure that you have some that stand out to you as far as when you feel like you really had a raw moment with the recording where it really caught you off guard, or it really just started to feel raw and natural instead of maybe scripted and planned?
Yeah, I mean, there were a few moments. I think, yeah, let's first look at the scripted and planned part, because I think that's good to know for the listener, that if you were to start such a podcast program, there's a lot of logistics you need to sort, right? So in our case, you need to invite the guest. The guest needs to be interested. You need them to commit to a date and a time to do the recording. Now, that sounds very obvious, but this is not like just one email exchange, and it's not like in, 1 day turnaround. In some cases, people get back to us like, 2 months after we send the invite, if they ever do. So this is kind of a lot of chasing, and then, getting them to commit to a date, and then making sure that that date works. And then also in our case, make sure they tell us about the challenges, and that these challenges fit in the framework of what we want to discuss. So that's all the scripted part. And then I didn't want to have a guest on that I hadn't done my homework on, right? So I wanted to make sure that whoever I invited also fitted in the entire spectrum of the season, that, they were all kind of worthy of each other, and that there was a logical follow-up and kind of a flow to all of the interviews. That's basically all scripted. So we had this beautiful overview that we worked with, where bi-weekly we said, okay, this one this week, we're going to record then, this is going to be the title, and et cetera, which is all the scripted and planned part. But I just wanted to say that's a lot more work than you think it is. At least now I know that it's a lot more work. In the beginning, I thought, that's just something you do when it just goes by itself. It doesn't. You need to plan all of that and need to properly focus on that. Then where it got spontaneous is basically once you have all of that sorted, and basically the expectation of you as well as of the interviewee is set, because it's so clearly cut how the interview is going to be. You start making space for the creativity in the interview, which I think was just really lovely and really nice. And I think almost in every interview, we had a little bit of that, right? That people just go off on a tangent and they just start talking about things that I was pretty sure like, well, that wasn't your intention to talk about that. And that's actually my favorite. That's my favorite part. That's my favorite part, that they just go off and get very random. And some people like it more than others. There have been people that basically say, well, listen, what are your questions? And well, they haven't said it as such, but you just noticed that they wanted to get on with the program. Whereas others, they love going off on a tangent. And
that's where you get to really peek inside their genius, like that's where you really get to see who they are. So I agree.
Yeah, that's the nice part. Yeah, if they stay too scripted themselves, then it just gets a little, you just sense it's just too pitchy, it's just like too, So it's nice if they come a little bit out of their shell. So there definitely have been some that were very kind of went off on a tangent, and then that tangent became a beautiful thing, or a very, in some cases also emotional thing. People that spoke about people that they lost, in a very recent past, or specific failures they had encountered. Well, they were trying so well to kind of position themselves as very successful people, but then kind of when you asked a little bit more, you basically saw, well, it's not that successful, is it? Or it's not success by the book as you expect it to be. And I think that uncovered beautiful things. Yeah. So definitely, those were definitely there. Also by far my most favorite parts. Also, that's the last thing I'm going to say about that. But also because they expected or they required some improvisation from my end, and some, staying close to myself from my end. Because if someone basically says, I very recently lost someone very dear to me, then, you know, I can either go and like, and we're moving on with the program, and, you know, this is unscripted, and, you know, what are you going to do? Or you just go with it, but it also requires an emotional response from my end, which, you know, which is what I tried to do. And my response was that I had no idea how difficult that must be, right? And that I was so incredibly sorry, right? Those are the best reactions you can give.
Yes, and you encountered this right off the bat, I believe, in episode 1. And I think just to illustrate how tender these moments are, we could play this clip right now with Rosalia, and then I want to hear more about how you felt when she was talking.
The situation that we experienced like a family started when I had a boy. I had a Geronimo, and I realized that something was happening. My father is a medical doctor, and he was the pediatrician of Geronimo, and he cannot at that time find the words to tell me that my baby was not doing well. Little by little, he was losing life, and finally, when he was 10 months old, he passed away. I feel that my life was going to an end.
Yeah, Rosalia is such a strong woman. I think she's just above and beyond. The energy that she has and the way she kind of moves herself in all circles, that's incredible. It's really incredible.
Right.
So I've known her for a few years, and I was wondering, how did I get to know her? Like, it just, you know, just by introduction, but also the fact that this wasn't a one-off conversation. We've met a few times, we've spoken many times, and yeah, I'm happy to say we really became friends. And such strength, her writing this little book, because she wrote a book about the entire experience of losing her child, and, you know, passing on the torch in terms of showcasing to people that things will get better. It won't pass. It's not, you know, in the case of Geronimo, which was the name of her son, that I don't think she'll ever forget him, but she has worked hard on finding strength in that loss.
Sure, and she's a president, and to see this side of her as a mother was so emotional for me. Yeah,
and also I think she indicated in that interview as well, like, you know, once you've been through that, then everything else is just a B game, right? Mm-hmm. Everything else is just like, you know,
I can't.
That's just the aftermath of misery. This is not misery. Whether it's a coup, because she suffered the coup, they didn't want her anymore as president at some point, to her also having to suffer through the machismo of her government, like not being accepted as a female president or vice president. You know, so many things that she just needed to get through, and then still being around there with such an enormously positive spirit and just moving on, you know, just moving on and doing it with such grace and such rigor. I mean, nothing but respect for her. It's amazing.
When do you feel like you hit your stride as a podcaster, as an interviewer?
What does that mean, hit your stride? I don't know what that means.
I'm wondering when or if you ever felt comfortable in that role.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a defined set of rules of what is a podcaster, right? I don't know or what is an interviewer. I have, you know, one of my best friends, he's a journalist, and he listened to the podcast. And I'm happy to say he thought that I did nicely, but he did give me some advice. So one of the things he told me is, like, be very clear when you ask a question. Just ask one question. Don't ask 7, for instance, which is what I did in the beginning. I was like, well, you know, I've seen you did this, and, you know, I've seen you did that. What is it like for you? I mean, isn't it this very difficult? And what is, you know, how do you do this, and how do you do that, and how do you do that? And that was a question number 1. But no, it's a set of questions. It's not one question. So these people need to go, you know, they go in their head like, well, you asked this and this and this and this, so I need to answer all of them. So So and that was good advice. That's solid advice. So I think on the level of asking questions, making sure it's a two-way street, be clear in the questions you want to ask. That was definitely things that I could learn. I think why I like it, and where I'd like to think I might be even, have some talent for it, is because always I like to talk. I like conversation. I like to listen to people, and I like to kind of push their story forward. And my wife always tells me this, that I also have a good memory for these things. If people tell me things, then I don't forget. I remember it. And a lot of my friends are always surprised when I kind of ask them about their aunts or uncles or grandmothers or, whoever. And then they say, how did you know this? It's like, well, you told me last time we met. And they're like, well, how do you remember? It's like, because you told me. It's like, what I wasn't supposed to remember. But I do.
Refreshing. That is so rare these days.
Yeah, I do. So I don't know. I don't know if that's refreshing or it just happens.
I'll tell you it is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, but I also see it a bit as if you don't want me to know, then don't tell me, right? Because people says like, well, I told you, but I didn't expect you were going to remember. And then they almost look at me like, please forget
How
this.
dare you?
How dare you? Yeah. How dare you? How dare you give this back to me? So I think that might have made me kind of a suitable host. But if I really am, time will tell, right? If I hope people will still like it after episode 100, that they still like to hear from me. But yeah, no, I do enjoy it. I think that's also the most important thing. And it's such a cliche, but it's so really, really true. If you do what you love, then it just comes easy, right? And these are just one of the things. It doesn't come hard to me. I like to do it.
Well, talking with you along these 5 months, you've shared with me your delight at finding common threads between these very successful, impressive guests and noticing things that they each hit on, or themes that would repeat or patterns that would come up. Do you want to share a few of those things from some of these guests? Yeah.
I think one of the funniest things was that many of my guests basically didn't really understand why I wanted to interview them, because they didn't really see that they had achieved anything. And when I pointed out to them, they're like, well, actually, if you have written a New York bestseller, then that has some merit to it. There's some kind of notable quality to it. Or if you have raised tens of millions, kind of to save the planet, that has some merit, that that deserves some well wishes or attention or a congratulations. And then I think the most funny example of that was Dr. Marijn Howard, so a Dutch trauma surgeon. And he started like, he didn't get it why I wanted to talk to him. And then he said like, I've just been lucky. It's like, stop already. I've just been lucky. And I thought it was so funny because he was just genuinely annoyed with me making a thing out of it. So I was like, well, I'm sorry, but you've written a book and stuff like that. So I've just been lucky. And funnily enough, that came back a few times. So many other guests also said, well, I've just been lucky. And it was just so funny to hear that. And those were also guests that had really done big things, right? Not just small, low-key things. No, they and I think they're right. I think what they mean to say is that they were on a certain path. They knew where they wanted to go, right? So their horizon was clear, but they needed a few more doors to open for them to get there. And then at some point on their path, those doors opened. And what they mean to say is like, I was lucky that door opened, because that was just a coincidence. I was just there on that path, and then this person got ill, and then I just knocked on that door, and then by sheer chance this door opened, and I could step in. And that's what they mean with luck. What I always counter to that is like, well, yes, but you wouldn't have even been around in the neighborhood if you weren't kind of working on trying to get somewhere, right? Because you wouldn't have seen that door was opening if you wouldn't have been on it, if you wouldn't have been working hard.
Knocking, yeah.
If you wouldn't have been knocking, exactly. If you wouldn't have been knocking on many of those doors and all of a sudden one opens, that's lucky that door opens, but you are still the one knocking. So it's not that you were just, being a couch potato and not doing anything with your life, and then all of a sudden the door opens and here you are. It's not like a miraculous transition. It's not a fairy tale. It's like you were working very hard and then certain doors opened for you, and yes, you were lucky in the fact that door opened, but you were very hard working.
And I think it's a beautiful way of very successful people admitting that they are surrounded by other very hardworking people who haven't necessarily had the opportunities that they've been given, and they're smart enough to point that out, to be aware. They might say, there are 20 other guys just like me who are working just as hard as I am, but I'm where I am. I think that they recognize that 5% of that, is just profound luck. But they're trying to credit the other people that they rub shoulders with who are also really paying their dues too, and they maybe aren't as successful.
That's the thing. And I think that keeps us very grounded, right? That there are people who work equally hard, if not harder. And these doors might have not opened for them, up to that level. And I think to realize that, to have that level of self-knowledge is also credit to, to the people who are in those positions, but also shows an awareness for all of us to say, well, it's not always fair, right? It's not always straightforward, or that the world owes you anything, or that it will all come if you just work hard. Luck is a very important factor, and I also take note of that. Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
We are very happy and excited to be partnering with Mindstone for the recording of this episode. Mindstone is a platform that lets you build courses curated from the best articles, podcasts, and videos available online, helping your students learn faster and remember more. You can think of Mindstone and learning in the same way you think of Spotify and listening. With Mindstone, you can use the internet as an infinite library of content that you can curate into playlists with tailored recommendations, and it's shareable with your students. Where Spotify enhances the listening experience, Mindstone exists to enhance the learning experience. Check out mindstone.com and find out how you can get started.
Well, this podcast is all about overcoming challenges and education. You can't seem to go 5 or 10 minutes without talking about reading and books. You love books. You love learning, and you're always asking your guests which book they would recommend, and many of your guests are authors themselves. But is there a book that stands out to you?
This is the entire reason that I ask, because I actually don't have one. I kind of have many, which kind of also are in certain phases of my life. There are certain books that fit certain phases of my life. So I when I look back, then I said, well, that book was so inspiring for the 21-year-old Aldo, so to say. So one book definitely that I want to mention there is The Power of One by Bryce Courtenay, which is it's about South Africa. It's a novel. It's about a young guy and how he evolves from a little kid who is living in South Africa, being of English descent, being bullied by the white people in his community of Dutch descent, so the Afrikaners. And then he becomes a successful boxer, right? And I just, his story is such an against all odds story and very energizing for, again, a 21-year-old Aldo, right? So I really enjoyed that book also because I think when I read it, I was in South Africa. And then, reading it with that on the background, it just makes it so more lively and so much more vivid than, if you were to read it here in Scotland, in the northeast of Scotland where I live. So that's definitely a book that I wanted to mention. Yeah, I mean, there are loads of books that I really enjoy, but for so many different reasons. If you were to ask me that question, which you just have, then I would say I can tie it down to one book. I can give you multiple for a variety of reasons. Like a book that I think is so strong is Principles by Ray Dalio. And I wouldn't be the first one to recommend it because it's just so grounded. Here's this billionaire hedge fund founder that just writes down that life comes down to just certain principles. And if you follow those principles, then a lot will come to you just because you just follow certain rules. And it's not like that he's giving you a magic formula or anything, right? He's just saying like, well, here's how humans interact. And if someone speaks like this, then just make sure you've got all your ducks in a row, or, be wary. But if someone talks like that, then, that might make sense. That might be more authentic and stuff like that. So it's just a very
lots of wisdom there. Yeah,
lots of wisdom there, but not wisdom of this will get you rich quick, right? Wisdom of just, here's what it's like to be a normal human being. That's basically kind of what I like in Principles by Ray Dalio. It just makes so much sense.
Well, what do you think, Aldo? Should we compile a list of all these books, all the books that you would recommend, all the books that our guests have recommended?
Spoiler alert, Natalie, you already have. We're working on compiling that list and bringing that list together, and we will be sure to publish it once it's all done. Still have a bit of homework to do there, but yeah, we definitely.
Yes, stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Yeah.
So tell me about episode 18, Aldo. Tell me about Dr. Edith Eger.
Yeah, no, so we made her a special episode because here's this 94-year-old lady who has written this mammoth of a book, which is The Choice. And talking about book recommendations, The Choice is definitely something you should read. It blows your mind. I have no words for how profound this book is, because this lady goes through such tremendous atrocities I cannot imagine that,
during World War II.
In World War II, but also being transported to Auschwitz, and then you need to go left where your mother needs to go right. And she didn't know at the time, but that was right to the gas chambers, right? And the last time she ever saw her. And so there are so many of those things in this book. Like, I cannot comprehend. I do not register, I do not compute on an emotional level what that should be like to go through. And then Dr. Edith Eger turns it around. She becomes a psychologist, right? After surviving the Holocaust, then not many years after the war, having to flee again because Hungary, where she's from, the Russians are taking over there and she doesn't want to stay. So she leaves, she seeks refuge in the United States. And again, she needs to start over completely with nothing and making a life for herself and doing it so successfully. And, going through so much, and still, if you talk to her, 94-year-old, it's like not a care in the world, right? So positive and so caring for other people's problems and other people's sorrow, because becoming a psychologist is all about that, right? Doing all her therapy sessions and talking to these people. So really using her pain to help others, which is, I think, in my book, the most profound, the strongest thing you could ever do.
My definition of love is the ability to let go. What are you holding on to?
Yeah.
What are you willing? Willing is a very good word. I had to be willing to be at the guards and realizing that somehow whatever is going on, it's temporary and I can survive it.
Mm.
So you never give up, ever, never give up.
Yeah.
Yes, truly inspiring. I remember she invited you to be her lifelong friend.
Yeah, it's so lovely. Yeah, she has a charm to her, right? She's really, she said it in the episode as well. She says, like, she asked me if I was the oldest, and I'm not. I'm the middle child. And then she said, well, you always want to make everyone happy as a middle child, and you know what they call the youngest. It's like, well, a charming manipulator. And she's the youngest, right? So I'm sure she was sincere, when she said it. It was very lovely, kind of how she said it, and she certainly has a way with words. Yeah, very warm, very charming, most definitely.
Yes. Which guest comes to mind if we were to really focus on children, like the heart of education, appreciating where children are coming from, trying to meet children where they are? Which episode really hit that note for you, do you think?
Yeah, there are two. There are two in that sense that I think one has always been a personal hero of mine, which is John Wood, and he's episode 5. And I just, what he did with founding Room to Read, and also how he had written about it in his books, Leaving Microsoft to Save the World and then Building Room to Read. Mm. This guy set up an organization that raised over $650 million to date to build libraries all over the world so children can have access to quality education.
Sure.
So what he put on the map and how he did it and how he ignited this, and of course he didn't do it alone. He also met the right people and all of those things, which he all says in the interview. But my hat's off to him. It's really, so profound. And he was episode 5. So you can imagine the first 4, we had recorded them previously. So I was a bit rusty in interviewing people. And then episode 5 was him right away. So, and so he was like, of my all-star guest list, he was very high, on top. And then having him as kind of essentially your first guest after the 4 pre-recordings was ginormous. And I did sense that I was a little starstruck when I spoke to him. And he was so down to earth. He was just, the most normal human being. But I was just like, oh my God, I'm talking to John Wood. It's just amazing. So this is Social Impact Me, who basically is, is a fan of people like that. So so he was a great experience. And I think another one who really wanted to stay close to children was the Princess Laurentine. And I think she was also a very memorable episode because that was the first episode that we did live, right? I was in her office. I was in the Netherlands, sitting there, of course, not being properly organized with my microphones. So having to do it like I'm a TV host, just holding the mic and then holding it in front of her and back and forth and back and forth. And she was just all about the children. And I had to say that in the beginning, she wasn't, she was talking about, at first I thought she was talking about child-centric learning and putting the child more central in the process of teaching and learning, which wasn't necessarily kind of a new observation. So I was kind of thinking like, okay, you are reiterating maybe something that's already said. But what she actually said, and where she was also new in her thinking is like, no. We can learn as much from children as children can learn from us. So it needs to be a genuine two-way street here, right? So that's what she said. Thinking about it, that was just such a strong argument. That was just such a strong plea.
Insight.
Yeah, insight or plea to come with. Yeah.
You call me an activist, and I say, yeah, that belongs with me. But I'm not an activist for activist's sake, and you will not see me standing on the barricade to challenge the status quo. And yet, in all my work, I challenge the status quo.
Yeah, I think I know what she means. It's not how a princess behaves, I think, to be on the barricades and, being out there with a banner saying, this must stop.
Mm. But
trying to influence the right process and trying to continuously endorse or support that what you think is right in education, right? And I think that's very much what she's trying to do. And her track record shows it, right? It's not just talk. It's, she literally is doing a lot.
Yes, that was episode 19. Highly recommend.
Yeah.
Listeners go re-listen to that beautiful interview.
Yeah, I think, overall, season 1 was just such an amazing experience. I deeply enjoyed the process and I deeply enjoyed working with you, Natalie, and working with these guests. I've also kind of thought about the experience because it actually really happens. It's like you really fall in love with a guest. Because you're building up, you're preparing, you're reading about them, you're trying to find info, you're watching their TED Talks or your, whatever videos available or previous interviews or whatever more. And then you kind of try to compile that in a good introduction. And then once the interview is over, then that's it, right? That's just a fun.
Oh, it's like goodbye.
It's goodbye. It's like, end of summer camp. It's like, but whatever. So that's just a funny experience. But I think that comes with.
So you'd see these people as friends, you would gladly, catch up with any of them any day.
Yeah. I'd like to think so. But, it might not be mutual. Don't worry, my feelings won't be hurt. Absolutely no worries. I know how these things go with getting these people for interviews, and some of them are just extremely busy, and they've gracefully given me some time so I could interview them. That was just a feeling, like, especially if they've written a book, then I wanted to read the book, and I'm making notes about the book, and I'm thinking, and so it all builds up. Right, it's such a build-up, and then it's such an enormous gratification when that interview went well, right? And when you also, very important, when you have the recording, because I'm not going to lie, we've had some recordings that went wrong. So I'd like to thank Craig Newmark, and I'd like to thank Stavros Yanuka. So Craig Newmark is episode 22. And Stavros, I don't know by heart.
One moment.
Oh, you're going to find out.
17.
Yeah, episode 17, for very gracefully doing the interview again, because these interviews, the recordings were corrupted, so we couldn't use them. And
you're a true podcaster if you've lost an episode and had to redo it. So congratulations, you're in the club.
Yeah, well, I'm happy with the experience, but I don't want it to ever happen again. Yeah. But, and I think now is the time, talking about what's going to happen in the future, it's the time to do a little announcement. Because, hold for drums, we are very, very, very proud and happy that we have been asked to interview this entire series of very, very exciting guests at the World Innovation Summit for Education, which is a global event, also dubbed the Davos of Education, which will take place in Doha in Qatar from December 7th until December 9th this year. And we will be a host on something called Wise on Air, meaning that we will be responsible for live stream interviews with the speakers at the summit. Now, these speakers are mind-blowing, kind of the things they've done, the things they've realized, and how they're doing it. And I hope we will be able to reveal their names and their backgrounds to you shortly once it's all confirmed. But it's such a great honor that they've asked us to do that. So I'm flying to Doha. Natalie's not, and she's very disappointed and very excited. But I'm flying to Doha December 6th. And then hopefully we'll be able to talk to all these guests and bring them back to you listeners for season 2. So stay tuned, because we're going to get loads of new guests and a very exciting season 2 lined up for you at Wise. That's where we're going to start, and that's hopefully going to kick off a hell of a new season. And I'm so excited about it. It's just such a reward. It's such a cherry on the cake that, you know, when we're at the end of the season and we have all these beautiful guests, if it would have ended right here, I would have already been so grateful, but it doesn't, right? That's just the beauty of it. It's going to continue. So I have in front of me, I just wanted to share that, 57 pages of notes of these 24 interviews.
Wow.
So can you imagine? 57
wow, what a
pages
treasure.
of challenges and things. So soon to come, I'm not kidding actually, is kind of sort of a syllabus. And now I'm just thinking aloud. This hasn't been approved by Natalie, but I'm just going to throw it out there. That I also want to kind of bring this together. I don't know, for one season or multiple seasons, but we also want to bring together kind of the text and the intros and kind of all the prep and questions and whatever. So at one point we're going to publish it out to the world. And do let us know if you have any suggestions there as well, right? It's not a one-way street. We want to hear what you think of all of it.
Yes, yeah, we would welcome any collaboration on this, but it is so great that you have, you know, all of this compiled, and, you know, for someone to be able to sit down and at a glance review all of the guests and the challenges, I think would be pretty valuable.
I hope so, yeah. So already so much done, and thanks so much, Natalie, for being my travel partner here and kind of, you know, taking on this journey and making sure season 1 is delivered. So also, by the by, we know we've got lots to learn, right? So we're working on the sound quality. We're working on the setup of the episodes. We're working on the designs. So we're all working on that, and season 2 is going to get better. Maybe not perfect yet, but better than season 1 on that level. But if you have any suggestions, then let us know, because we want to know. And also make sure that you share your thoughts. So share reviews or ratings or whatever. If you don't like it, give us a 1, right? We won't like it, but it's good feedback at the end. We now hear so many people who like it, but maybe the people that don't like it don't even bother to rate it, right? But it's all good for us to hear. So whatever interaction can take place, that's just so much appreciated.
Yes.
Thank you so, so much to everyone who has been listening. And yeah, again, this is a dream come true. This has just been an amazing season 1, and I'll see you in the beginning of December for season 2. If you liked this episode of the TeachPitch Podcast, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod for our beautiful theme music, Le Grand Chase. This podcast was produced and edited by Natalie Piles. Project coordination by Inva Cheney.